Perek Yud Beis, Mishnah Dalet. HaKosev shtei oisios behelam echod chayev. Someone who writes two letters, behelam echod, in one period of forgetfulness, is chayev. Now, even though we learned in the end of the previous Perek, the last Mishnah, we said, Ein chayov in zeh haklal, kol chay v'chatos ein chayov in ache tchiloson v'soifon shkogo. And therefore, it's pashut that a person has got to have written the shtei osios behelam echod. Nonetheless, this is going to be an introduction to a concept that the Mishnah in Mishnah Vav is going to explore. And therefore, the Tosfos Yontov explains that this is merely an introduction to Mishnah Vav. But either way, we know this information already, that someone who writes two letters in one period of forgetfulness, i.e. he wasn't aware that it was Shabbos, etc., etc., then he's going to be chayev. Now, so it continues the Mishnah. Kosav bidyoy. If a person wrote with ink, we're talking about now the various materials with which a person is going to do the act, the malacha of ksiva with, and with which is going to be chayev. So it's got to be something which is permanent, which makes a mark, etc., etc. So if he writes bidyoy with classic ink, then he is of course chayev. Basam. If a person writes basam, which is the Bartanura says urpament belaz, which the Art Scrolls translates as he says urpament is a yellow arsenic. The Rambam he says it's an ink derived from a grass root. Okay, so he writes with sam or basikra. Now basikra, the Bartanura says, is min even shetzuveh edom. That that the ink is some sort of red dye or the like, or basikra, which the Art Scroll translates as vermilion. Again, it's some sort of dye. The Bartanura says min ofar v'tzove shochar. It's either the Rambam, the Bartanura says it's a type of black earth, or in the second pshat the Bartanura gives, it's a sraf ilon guma belaz, which the Art Scroll translates as gum Arabic, which is used in the manufacture of ink. Okay, for v'kan kanoisam, which is a material which the Art Scroll translates as ferrous sulfate, which the Bartanura says zog ba'aravi u belaz vitriol, which the Art Scroll translates as copperas or vitriol. The Gemara describes it as the blacking used by shoemakers. Or anything that leaves some sort of mark. Fine. So anything which leaves some sort of mark. The Bartanura says, which this comes to include water in which gul nuts have been soaked, and that water has obviously been dyed, and you would write with that water. That's considered permanent enough, or considered enough of a roishem that a person would be chayev for ksiva on Shabbos. Continues the Mishnah. Al shnei kosle zovyos. If a person wrote on two walls which form a corner. So, for example, that if a person, for example, wrote one letter over there, and then he wrote another letter on the wall over here. So even though he's not writing two letters on one wall, but he's writing one over there and one over there, that's considered still ksiva. Alternatively, says the Mishnah, Val shnei luchei pinkas. If he writes on 2 pages of a ledger, so imagine you've got some sort of like a book, and it's not on one page, but it sort of folds round. So you've got 2 pages, and the ledger just folds into different pages. Even if you write on 2 separate pages, one letter on there and one letter on there, then you're still going to be chayev, so long as so long as they can be read together, then chayev. So the chiddush is, it does not have to be on one page, or in fact on one wall. So long as it can be read together, then a person would be chayev for that ksiva. Now, more than that, if they were written on different levels where they couldn't be read together, then similarly a person would be potter for that. They've got to be written close enough that you can be read together. Now, we mentioned previously in the previous Mishnah that according to the Bartanura, according to other opinions, that the 2 letters that one writes for the minimum share of ksiva on Shabbos do not have to form a word. So for example, if a person wrote Aleph Aleph, even though those two letters don't form a word, nonetheless you'll be chayav for ksiva on Shabbos. So the Alter makes an interesting point. He says, it's from the Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Gimel on base. He says that even though that according to many opinions one is liable even where the two letters do not form a word, nonetheless the two letters must at least have the potential to form a word. So in other words, even though the two letters that you write do not have to form the word, the Aleph and the Aleph, nonetheless it's got to at least potentially be able to form a word, i.e. the possibility of being read together. So if you have one letter in one place and then another letter far away, since they can't be read together, since ein negim zeh zeh, then you're not going to be chayav, at least in Torah, midrabanan be chayav. But that shouldn't be confused with the shitta which we mentioned previously, that the two letters don't form a word, because there they could potentially form a meaningful word. You could add letters or something like that. But if they're written where they can't be read together in the first place, then you would in fact be potter. Okay, continues the Mishnah. HaKosev al basara is chayiv. If a person takes a pen or whatever it is and writes on his flesh, then you'd be chayiv. And the chiddush here is that even though the body's heat will cause the ink to eventually disappear, nonetheless you'd be chayiv. The Rambam says in Hilchos Shabbos, Perek Yud Aleph, Halacha Tes Zayin, HaKosev al basara, says the Rambam. If someone writes on his flesh, because it's skin, it's and therefore it's considered a lasting material. Even though one's body heat is going to remove the ksav, it's similar to writing, which will eventually become erased. So that's considered chayiv. And the chiddush is that even though the writing may later become erased because of the person's body heat, that's considered a chiyuv on Shabbos. That's considered a kosev on Shabbos. And the chiddush and the chiluk is that it's nothing inherently wrong with the ksav itself. It's not as if the material with which you're writing is going to dissolve by itself, but rather it's some sort of external factor which is causing the erasing of this ksav. I.e., the person's body heat itself is going to cause it, and there's nothing inherently wrong with the material with which you're using to write, or with onto which you're going to write. So therefore, HaKosev al basara is chayev. Concludes the Mishnah, HaMasoret al basara. If someone scratches onto his skin, he takes a knife and he sort of scratches out some sort of writing on his skin, so then it's machoikas. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatos. Rabbi Eliezer holds this is considered proper writing, and therefore you're chayev a chatos if a person does that b'shogeg. Rabbi Yeshua poter. Rabbi Yeshua says you're potter because that's not derech ksiva. It's not considered a normal way of writing to take a knife or a stylus or something to write on your skin, and therefore you're considered potter. What's more, you would also would not be chayev for chovel, even if taking a pen or taking a very sharp instrument and writing on your flesh will cause blood, and therefore you could be chayev for chovel. There are reasons why you would be potter even for chovel. Why? Because first of all, even though we have a machlokus, famous machlokus with davar she'ein mischavin or ein mischavin, but even according to Rav Shimon, who holds a davar she'ein mischavin is potter, this is a pesik reisha, so l'chari should be chayev. But here it's a pesik reisha to lo nichele. You're not particularly, you don't desire the appearance of blood, and therefore it's a pesik reisha to lo nichele. So even for chavala, for chovel, you would be potter. And furthermore, presumably it's a melacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa. You don't need the blood for anything. Your intention and your desire is to write. That is your intention and your purpose. And the halach is in fact like Rabbi Yeshua, and therefore a person who was mesaret al basaro would be potter for ksiva on Shabbos, and as noted, one would also be potter for chovel as well. That is the end of Mishnah Dalet.